Hey, Algebra 1A kids, this week we are finishing up Chapter 5. We're looking at 5.7. If you looked ahead at 5.7 practice, it's kind of weird. I'm doing things slightly differently this week. The notes are just 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the practice is this cow tack thing, and I'll let you figure that out. There's instructions. You'll be fine. It'll be great. Alright, so, anyways. Last week we had talked about graphing inequalities. So, just flip it back really quick. Let's get the other paper. We talked about how you graph the line like normal, and then you decide is it dotted or solid, and then you decide do you shade above or below. There are very few cases where you have to decide if it is left or right, but this is one of them, like this. So, anyway, now we're on 5.7, which is what happens when I give you a system of inequalities. Now, inequalities. If I give you a system of inequalities, there's only one way to solve it, and that's by graphing. So when we did a system of equations, we talked about graphing, substitution, and elimination. There's not really substitution or elimination with this. It's just graphing. You see what I mean? Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with this top inequality right here, which I will graph in blue, and I'm going to pretend like the bottom one does not exist. It is currently dead to me. Go away. Okay, so I'm going to start at my y-intercept of positive 5, right. Okay, and then I'm going to follow my slope of 1 over 1, sure. So up 1, right 1, 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 or you could go in the opposite, down 1 left, down 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 left. Whew! I make as many dots as I possibly can. Now I need to ask myself 2 more questions. Is it dotted or solid? That's the first question. You should say there's no line underneath the inequality sign, therefore it's dotted. So make your best dotted line. If you do not have a printer at home or access to graph paper, I'm sorry, this is not going to be great for you. You can sketch these on just lined paper if you want. It's just a 10 by 10 graph. But just do the best you can. All right. Now I'm going to say, should I shade above or below? But pause. Don't actually shade yet. Now, since this is a greater than sign, it has nothing to do with the line underneath. It's just which way the sign is facing. Greater than, I would shade above. So that's this area right here. Notice I'm not shading. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put arrows. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to say if I were to shade, it would be in that direction. Now I'm going to move on to this bottom inequality, and I'm going to graph that in red. We're going to start at the y-intercept, which is negative 2. And then I'm going to look for the slope, which is negative 6 over 1. So I go down 6, right 1, down 6, up, I'm off my graph, or opposite, up 6, left 1, up 6, left 1. Okay, so I've got 4 dots here in red. Then I'm going to say dotted or solid. Well, there's a line underneath this time, so we should say that this is a solid line. Now, be very careful here because this goes super close to the origin. I guess doesn't matter a ton, but this, when I decide to shade above or below, hopefully most of you can see it, but above would be over here to the right. Below would be to the left, because if I were to look at this, it's slightly tilted to the left, so this is below, this is above. Since this says less than or equal to, it means I would shade below, which is all this stuff to the left. Now, I'm not going to shade just yet. I'm going to draw arrows. Arrows. All right, now hopefully, if you just look at the red line and the blue line, you realize that it has been cut into 4 different sections. You've got this big one right here. We'll call that section number 1. You've got a small one right here. That's section number 2. Section 3 and section 4. Now, when I shade, I'm actually only going to shade one of those areas. And my goal is to shade the commonly shaded area. Here's what I mean by that. If I were to shade blue, it would have been all up here. I'm just do this in pencil just for fun. It would have been up here, right? That's what would have happened if I had shaded in blue, for the blue line. If I had shaded in the red line, it would have been over here. Now, you should then look and you should say, which of the 4 sections did I color in twice? Hopefully, you were looking at section 3 right here. Now, you don't actually have to say, I'm going to shade in for the blue, I'm going to shade in for the red, and then I'm going to go back and say, which section do I shade in twice? This is why I draw arrows. Look at my red arrows and my blue arrows. This section right here is the only one of the 4 sections that's got red arrows pointing at it, as well as blue arrows. Section number 2, I've got blue arrows pointing at it, but no red arrows. Section number 4, I've got red arrows pointing at it, but no blue arrows. And section number 1's very lonely. It's got no arrows at all. You are sad. Let's just draw a sad face here. Now, the answer, or answers to the system, is everything in this commonly shaded area. If I were to take any point in this area right here, and I were to plug it into both of these inequalities, it would make them both true. That's it. You graph both, you find the commonly shaded area. All right, so like I said for notes, we're going to do all 4 on this page, and then the cow thing is going to be what you're going to do on Wednesday. All right, so let's look at number 2. I'm going to start with the top one. I'll graph it in blue. Looks like we're starting at our y-intercept of 7. And then our the slope right here says 5 over 7, which typically tells me to go up 5, right 7, but I cannot, because that takes me off the graph. So instead of upright, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to go down 5, left 7. You could try again, down 5, left 7, but again, you'd be off your graph. Okay, so I only have 2 dots, but that's okay. We only need 2 dots to define a line. Now you should ask yourself, is this dotted or solid? Well, there's no line underneath, so you should draw a solid line. I'm sorry, I'm going to retract my statement there. I said solid while I drew a dotted line. Wow, ladies and gentlemen, quarantine's getting to me. Anyways, no line underneath here, so it's dotted. Sorry, no line underneath, no equal to, so it's dotted. Okay? Then, since it says less than, that means you would shade below. Notice I'm just going to draw some arrows. You don't even have to draw as many arrows as I did. I just like to make sure. Now I'm going to move to the bottom one, and I'm going to graph it. So we're going to start at our y-intercept, which is -3. And my slope here is -5 over 7. Which tells me to go down 5 and to the right 7, which I can do. You also could go up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and to the left 7. You could try and go up 5, left 7 again. That's it. Okay, let's see if I can get my words right this time. Dotted or solid? Well, I look right here and I say, oh, there is a line underneath it, so this one's solid. Nailed it. And then I say, well, this one also says less than or equal to, but the less than part is the important for shading. So I would shade below. Okay, now here's how I would do this if I were you. Instead of like we did with number 1, like labeling them 1, 2, 3, 4, and then shading again, saying, this is a commonly shaded area. I'm just going to look at my arrows. And I'm going to say, does this section has arrows pointing at it from blue and red? No. Does this section have arrows pointing at it, blue and red? No. What about this teeny section? No. What about this section right here? Yes. So this is my answer. And I'd move on. So this is what a system of inequalities looks like. 2 lines, 1 section shaded. Let's move on to number 3. All right, a little bit more difficult. X is greater than 3. What the poop? How am I supposed to graph x is greater than 3? Well, if I were to pretend for a hot second it said x equals 3, that means I could make a t-chart and I could say, well, I know x has to be 3 no matter what. Y, on the other hand, could be anything. It could be a 2, it could be a -4, it could be a 0, whatever. Then I can graph those points. 3, 2, 3, -4, 3, 0, and then hopefully you can see it's a line that's straight up and down on the value of x equals 3. But then you have to ask yourself, dotted or solid? Well, since this does not have a line underneath it, it is in fact dotted. Hey, you see how I said that correctly again? No big deal, it's okay to be impressed. And then this is one of those weird things where you say, instead of above or below, you say left or right. X is greater than 3. Usually this is pretty obvious. Hopefully you'd say, if I look at the x-axis, numbers that are bigger than 3 are to the right. So I would shade to the right. But don't forget, this is a system. So we're just going to write some arrows saying, if I were to shade right now, I would shade to the right. Then I look at this one. Okay. So same thing. I'm going to look at my x-intercept, same thing as numbers 1 and 2, which is +8. And then my slope here says -2/3. Remember, don't freak out too much about where your negative goes. You've got two options. You can say it's a -2 over a +3, or you can say it's a +2 over a -3. Let me show you what this one would look like first. -2/3 means I go down 2, right 3, put a dot. I could keep going. Down 2, right 3, down 2, right 3, down 2, poop, done. This one, on the other hand, +2 doesn't say to go down, it says to go up. So I would go up. But a -3 on the bottom doesn't say to go to the right, it says to go to the left. So I would go up 2, left 3. Notice it's still in line with all the other dots. Hopefully you also notice, again, there's no line here, so I actually have 2 dotted lines, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. And then, since it says less than, that means I would shade below. Okay. Now, I know y'all got to skip out on your PSAT 9 this year. You will take your PSAT 10 next year, sorry. But let me tell you what types of questions it would ask for something like this. It would probably give you a system, something like this, and then it would say, this point right here is point A. This point right here is point B. This point right here is point C. This point right here is point D, and it would ask you which one of these are solutions to the system of inequalities. And then you would have to say, let's see, well, A and B, I've got red arrows, but no blue arrows pointing at them. Okay, so it's not those, darn. C, I've got blue arrows, but no red arrows. It's not those, darn. But D, I've got blue arrows and red arrows. Awesome. So my answer would be D. That's one example of a type of question that the SAT, PSAT would give for a system of inequalities. All right, let's shift to our last one for today, number 4. I can kind of see some cows behind this. Ooh. Okay, start at the top here. We're going to graph this. All right, we're looking at my y-intercept of -1. And then I've got a slope of -4/3, down 1, 2, 3, 4, over 1, 2, 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4, right 1, 2, 3. Or I could go in the opposite direction. I could go up 4, left 3, up 4, left 3. Again, you don't have to, but I prefer to make as many dots as will fit on my graph. Then I should say no line underneath, therefore this should be a dotted line. It's the best looking dotted line I think you've ever seen in your entire life. And then since this says greater than, remember greater than means up, less than means down. So if I were to shade right now, I would shade above this line. But I'm not shading right now, because I still need to graph this guy right here. My y-intercept this time is a positive 1. So one of my blue arrows, 3. My slope is also a negative 4 over 3. So I go down 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2, 3. Down 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2, 3. Down 1, 2, 3, poop. Okay. Or you could go in the other direction. Up 1, 2, 3, 4. Left 1, 2, 3. Up 1, 2, 3, 4. Left 1, 2, 3. This one's going to be a solid line. And you may already see something that's a little weird here. And then since it says greater than, I would shade above. All right, now pause for a second. Let's look at this. This is a little weird. Hopefully you've noticed my two lines are parallel. Now, if we were doing a system of inequalities, we would say, oh, shoot, no solution, boom. Now, is it possible to get no solution with a system of inequalities? Yes. Again, if this were a system of equations, system of equalities, same thing. System of equations, parallel means no solution. But since this is a system of inequalities, it's slightly different. I've actually broken my graph up into 3 sections. I've got this big section on bottom, I've got this big section on top, and I've got this tiny sliver in the middle. But here's the good news. You ask yourself the same question. Which section has red arrows and blue arrows pointing at it? Well, let's look at this tiny sliver in the middle. I had blue arrows pointing up, which is good, but my red arrows are actually pointing away from the sliver in the middle, so that's not it. This big section on the bottom has no arrows pointing at it whatsoever. My answer is actually this giant section on top. Stare at that for a second to make sure you understand. Because I've got blue arrows pointing at it and red arrows pointing at it. So any of these, any point in here would make both of these things true. For instance, if I were to take this point right here, 10, 10, and I were to plug it in to one of these two things, or to both of them, it would make that statement true. On the contrary, if I were to take a point like this one, -6, 2, just for fun, I'm going to plug this one into one of these. Let's plug it into the top one. Y is greater than -4/3 x minus 1. And I'm going to plug in -2 for y, greater than -4/3 times -6 for x minus 1. Let's see what happens. Well, I've got -2 greater than, let's see, -4/3 times -6. You can use a calculator if you want. Hopefully you don't need to. That is 8. I've got -2 is greater than 8 minus 1 is 7. Is that a true statement? Is -2 greater than 7? No. That's because it's not in the shaded region. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was 5.7 notes. This is Monday. Between now and then, I want you to see if you can read these instructions and figure out what this graph attack thing with the cows is. And I'll go over it on Wednesday. All right, miss y'all. Bye.